The tear sent one last shockwave over the island, ripping a gust of strong winds over. Up in the sky, lightning striking haphazardly, wind whipping around, the sky darker than ever. Then, there it was. The remains of the island of Azarka from the Treq universe. The islands were falling through the tear in reality, striking the ground with powerful force, destroying anything below. Most Cradons survived from the crashing, but not many Zephians did. As the last few chunks of land crashed on the island, the rip of the space fabric in the sky sealed away. The being that had been trapped under the ice broke free. He looked identical to Leroy, but his color was orange instead of green. His name was Zeroy. Zeroy looked around, seeing destruction everywhere. Oddly enough, this seemed expected to him. Zeroy ran towards the Zader mothership, dropping a piece of paper that was in his grasp. The paper listed Leroy's ultimate plan that he had all along. I am just like you, Zeroy. We are no different from each other besides very few things. I am Leroy, your Treq universe counterpart. I've been banished by the god of my universe to a different dimension named Trax. The people of the island I am on are attempting to bring him back to save them. They have created an object they call the Scarlet Pyramid, in order to transport him back from the universe I sent him to. But this made me think. These people created an object capable of storing enough energy to transport things across dimensions. At this rate, what would they make of the Scarlet Pyramid? A weapon of incredible destruction? An object of unending energy? If there was only one way for me to access a more advanced Scarlet Pyramid, my body would allow me to absorb the energy within it to evolve to a higher being. You have not yet discovered the incredible power of interdimensional travel yet. Though this has saved you from much trouble, you have also blinded yourself from an overarching truth. Everything you know has a parallel and equal version of itself for every single universe, just like you and me. This led me to think that if the Scarlet Pyramid exists in this universe, there is a parallel version of an even more advanced Scarlet Pyramid in a different universe. I've found that such thing does exist, and it is contained in your universe. It's called the Violet Pyramid. It had shown signs of being the strongest version of these pyramids out of all the dimensions I've searched through. If the small chance where I am unable to attain this Violet Pyramid arises, I want you to absorb the Violet Pyramid for yourself. In exchange for this information I give to you, I want you to finish off what I have started if I am unable to myself. I entrust you to help carry out my plan. Attached to the paper was another paper written by Leroy to describe to Zeroy exactly how he could travel interdimensionally. Zeroy had been taught of the existence of the Violet Pyramid and the power of interdimensional travel because of the geniusness of Leroy. Now all that was left for him was to absorb the Violet Pyramid and follow through with his part of Leroy's deal, to finish what Leroy started. The Cradons constructed a railroad around the entire center of the island, having tunnels dug through the crashed Treq islands. This transportation allowed them to help transport those that were injured or to evacuate areas in case of emergency. The population of the island was roughly 75% Cradons and 25% Zephians. Both the Cradons and Zephians were mourning the destruction of their beloved islands, but could not waste any time. Something terrible was coming, and they had to prepare as best as they could. Lord Voldir was searching for Zeroy. Somehow he already knew that Zeroy was up to something terrible. He suddenly found him, standing with the Violet Pyramid in his grasp. Without hesitating, Voldir charged straight for Zeroy. Purple lightning struck around Zeroy's orange body. The pyramid vibrates with energy, sparking and sending bolts of violet energy haphazardly. Voldir charged his fist right into the face of Zeroy when suddenly everything went bright. Voldir looked up at his fist. His hand was cracked, and Zeroy's face didn't even have a mark on it. Zeroy had become entirely purple. The power of the Violet Pyramid resonated through his chest. Pulses of light shined through the cracks left behind where the pyramid was struck. Voldir slowly lowered his arm and backed away from Zeroy. A tear dripped down his cold, stone face. Zeroy raised his purple arm, gently placing his hand on top of Voldir's head. In a moment, the stone head of Voldir was crushed, his body limply falling to the ground. Every single universe that exists is maintained by a designated god for that dimension. For the Treq universe, it was Voldir. But what would happen if the god were to be killed? No universe could ever be godless. So the one that kills the god becomes the new god of that dimension. For Zeroy's case, killing Voldir now deems him as the new god of the Treq universe, giving him the abilities of a god, such as flight, unaging, extreme strength, and to prevent a specific being from teleporting to a different dimension. Zeroy charged towards the people on the island, butchering them like they were mere insects. Zeroy had single-handedly created one of the largest slaughterings in history for Kradons and Zephians alike. Few found refuge from Zeroy, but then another problem arose. All that were killed by Zeroy began to stand back up. The sheer energy from Zeroy was enough to bring back those that he killed to life, but they weren't the same they were before. They came back, growing large and disgusting. They were much larger in size, some being 10 feet tall and much stronger. They could barely even be called people anymore due to their horrible and foul appearance. They were named by the survivors to be monstrosities. The survivors all began hiding out in the ruins of the island, having to defend themselves against monstrosities. Zeroy was going around the island, searching every place for any people. The Kradons and Zephians got along quickly. The Zephians would introduce the Kradons to their home, or what was left of it. The island was full of Zephians just prior to when the Kradons arrived. Zeroy had cleared almost every hiding spot. The Kradons suddenly had an idea that their best and only way to fight against the forces of Zeroy: Cap Industries, the factory that was transported on a chunk of land from Ozarka. The factory used to be the best funded company for the Kradons. It would make weapons that would shoot caps at deadly speeds. Even some certain caps could be flicked at deadly speeds as well. This would be perfect for the survivors. They set up a base at the abandoned factory and gathered all the weapons they could find. The monstrosities that would fight back were no match to the forces of the cap weapons. But with how quickly the survivors were being killed off, they would surely run out of soldiers to fight against Zeroy. They then started to recycle the factory and reconstruct the machines within it to create robots to provide manpower for the survivors. These robots were extremely powerful, even capable of taking out multiple monstrosities at a time. The people created a leader for the robotic soldiers. His name was Ticklebot. Supplies were running low for the survivors in Cap Industries. They were left with two options: die hiding from Zeroy or fight back and die trying. Taking down Zeroy would require more manpower than they had, especially against the monstrosities that Zeroy has made a part of his army. Their best chance at winning the war would be to hinder Zeroy's power by taking down his army of monstrosities, but doing this meant for a large-scale plan. Due to the population having to evacuate so frequently, most of the people lived near the railroad around the center of the island for easy and quick escapes if necessary. Since there is an abundance of people here, monstrosities are attracted to the railroad as well, making this area to be home to the largest population of both people and monstrosities. Ticklebot devised a plan to take down the monstrosities using the railroad system. The train there could easily be fortified and rigged with weapons, so when traveling through the railroad they could kill every monstrosity that they see. If the plan succeeds, they kill a vast majority of Zeroy's monstrosities, leaving him outnumbered against the people. The train was finally fully prepared for war. There were sturdy defenses built around the whole of the train, along with deadly guns mounted through the windows and the sides of it. The people were ready to finally begin taking back the island. The train slowly started moving, grabbing the attention of surrounding monstrosities. As the beasts started approaching the train, bullets whizzed by, striking the monsters and killing them one by one. The train was picking up speed, but so were the monstrosities. The train was moving at its top speeds, and hordes of monstrosities were chasing it down. The train, rattling the railroad as it flew along, was too fast for the monstrosities to attack it, finally giving the people their advantage they craved for. The beasts were falling dead all around them, until suddenly this train screeched on the tracks. Zeroy had arrived and crashed on top of one of the rail cars behind the train. Some people jumped out of the train, knowing they would have to face the monstrosities, but it may have just given them a higher chance of survival than what Zeroy had planned. Zeroy flew up and charged alongside the train. Just when Zeroy was flying next to the engine of the train, he swerved and bashed into the train, knocking it completely off its railroad tracks. The train skidded along the ground for a while, until coming to a stop. The people inside were injured, but not dead yet. Zeroy landed gently at the crash site of the train. He looked around at the people, then started charging towards them. Suddenly, Zeroy was knocked off the ground by someone. He looks up to see a large robot flying above him. Ticklebot was hovering in place with several rocket boosters. Ticklebot, the leader of the Kraton and Zephian robot army, was by far the strongest robot that they had ever made. But with all of his strength, even Ticklebot himself was unsure if he could fight a god. But there was nothing else he could do but try. Ticklebot pummeled Zeroy into the ground further. Each punch had rockets behind it to make them as strong as they could be. Zeroy swung Ticklebot off of him and then flew up. His body was slightly dented with very minor scratches, but it was still the most damage anyone has ever seen Zeroy take. Zeroy slowly flies closer to Ticklebot. The cap hits Zeroy's leg. He turns around to see someone with their cap gun pointed at him. Another cat hits him. He turns around to see another person that shot at him. Then another cap hit him. And another. Before he knew it, he was getting barraged with caps from all directions. The Kratons, Zephians, the Ticklebot's robot army were all firing at Zeroy. While Zeroy was getting bombarded by caps, Ticklebot took his advantage and struck Zeroy across the face. He quickly got out of the way, just to come back and strike him once more. Zeroy was too disoriented to be able to fight back, leaving him vulnerable in this moment. Ticklebot went in for another hit. As his fist reached out to hit him, Zeroy quickly snatched Ticklebot's arm and aggressively flung him into the ground in front of him. This caught everyone off guard, giving Zeroy a moment from being barraged by caps. He took up the moment and flew right down on Ticklebot. He jabbed Ticklebot with his left arm, followed by his right, and then his left again, and kept punching faster and faster. Sparks shot out of Ticklebot's face, but Zeroy didn't hinder. The barrage of gunfire started once more, and Zeroy charged into the crowd of people. He went from person to person, punching them right through their chests. Before he could even think, Ticklebot somehow got up and flew right into Zeroy, sending him right into the wreck of the derailed train. Zeroy was amazed that Ticklebot was still alive, but was clearly getting frustrated with his perseverance. Zeroy got up, grabbed the train car that he crashed into, and lifted it into the air. The car was immensely heavy, but Zeroy managed to throw it right back at Ticklebot, knocking him into the ground and trapping him underneath. Zeroy walked over. Seeing Ticklebot's bottom half stuck under the train, Zeroy lifts his foot and swiftly crushes Ticklebot's head in a stomp. The glowing lights on his body faded away as he went limp. During this fight, many were able to escape, but those that were too late perished to the wrath of Zeroy. Many were lost to the train fight in the previous year. Ticklebot, though brave, was very short-lived. He sacrificed himself to give time for the others to escape. Ultimately, nobody could fully decide whether the fight was a success or not. They managed to take down many monstrosities and slightly damage Zeroy, but in turn, for their own people and Ticklebot, just may not have been worth it. Through the year, after the Battle of the Train, the people have been preparing to give their all in one final and ultimate battle. They would either come out victorious or dead. No other option was left. Tanks nearly the size of buildings were prepared, along with the ever-expanding robot army. To serve in place of Ticklebot, they created a potentially even stronger robot known as Hiccupbot. He was much bulkier in size, making him slower, but much more fortified. Hiccupbot would serve as commander of the robot army in place of Ticklebot. The day had come. It was time to take back the island and to finish off Zeroy. On the southern end of the island, the tanks began to roll out. Zeroy's monstrosities stood no chance against the massive tanks. Each bullet shot from a tank left craters in the ground, instantly killing any monstrosities in its path. Hiccupbot led his army and hundreds of robots, all taking steps in synchronization. They shook the ground they marched on and took down tons of monstrosities that came by. It was clear that Zeroy's monstrosities were losing this fight. The technological advancements that the people had made in preparation for this final fight was much more than Zeroy anticipated. Finally, Zeroy flew out above the battleground. He watched explosions scattered about, seeing the deaths of his enemies, but mostly the deaths of his own monstrosities. He flew down towards a crowd of people, crashing and leaving a crater behind. The survivors from the attack fought back, but Zeroy didn't flinch. He kept marching forward and killing. The robot army arrived to intervene with Zeroy's destruction. Zeroy looked at the horizon, seeing it covered by mechanical soldiers, all led by one larger machine. Hiccupbot stood tall in front of his men. pointing slowly at Zeroi. A wave of caps covered the sky, all coming from the robotic army. The caps were coming straight down towards Zeroi. He looked around for cover, but none was there. Suddenly, a tank from the distance shot a shell right towards Zeroi. He floated up slowly, watching the surge of caps close in on him, while focusing on the tank shell charging right at him. He suddenly and gracefully dodged around the shell as it was about to strike him, gripping the sides of it. Zeroi had averted the tank's shell explosion by catching it. He then twisted and threw the shell up into the wave of caps above him. When the caps hit the shell, it exploded, sending the caps everywhere, but they were originally targeted. The devastation from the wave of the caps killed many of the people and robotic soldiers, but they kept pushing. One failed attack on Zeroi wasn't enough to stop their pursuit for victory. Zeroi flew through the crowds of people and robots, killing them as he went through. But as time went on and more were being killed, many people started to run for their lives. Zeroi was not slowing, and Hiccupbot couldn't bear to watch any more die. Zeroi suddenly got slammed into the ground. He looked up to see Hiccupbot flying there, almost exactly like how Ticklebot did that last year. Zeroi bolted right back up, smashing his fists into Hiccupbot's metal body. The robot was much stronger than Ticklebot, but even still received heavy damage from Zeroi's utter strength. The two dueled, flying around the sky and exchanging barrages of punches and hits. Meanwhile, the people were suffering from Zeroi's attacks on them. Many succumbed to their injuries, and others died on the spot. The Kraton and Zephian population was shrinking shorter and shorter by the minute. Zeroi suddenly struck Hiccupbot with a brutal attack, sending him straight into the ground. The robotic army rushed to help fix him. Hiccupbot was immensely damaged, while Zeroi floated in the sky with few scratches and dents. Before any repairs could even be made, Zeroi flew down and crashed right where Hiccupbot rested. Zeroi gripped the robot's arm and ripped it cleanly off. Hiccupbot screamed in agony, and Zeroi grabbed his other arm. Zeroi continued to rip off Hiccupbot piece by piece. Sparks shot through the air and robotic screams echoed. Eventually, the screams stopped. Zeroi slowly stood back up and turned around. He was completely surrounded by absolutely massive tanks. He floated up and bolted right through the hole of one of the tanks. The other tanks fired at the one Zeroi was inside, but the armor on the tank was seemingly just too strong to penetrate with their own tank shells. The tank Zeroi was inside of slowly started to rise in the air. Zeroi's below it, lifting the giant, building-sized tank into the air. He then hurled it at another tank, crashing the two into each other and causing the ground-shaking explosion. Zeroi continued flying around, picking up debris and launching it at people. He continued taking out every tank by breaking inside and hurling it wherever he wanted. Zeroi killed and killed, never slowing for anything. The people had no choice but to surrender and run for their lives. Hiccupbot was dead, and the robotic army was shortened immensely. The population of people had never been so small, and Zeroi had never made so many monstrosities before. The end truly had come for the people. The robotic army was completely killed, and all due to the sheer amount of monstrosities and from Zeroi himself. There were only about 94 Kratons and 33 Zephians left. All of them were hiding for their life. Zeroi slowly checked around every corner, finding ones that were hiding from him still. If Zeroi didn't find a group of hiders, the monstrosities eventually would. One by one, every single person perished by the hands of Zeroi and his monstrosities. Every single person was dead. Kratons and Zephians, all extinct. The island was silent. Once filled with hope, now completely hopeless. Nobody survived. Not one. Zeroi and his monstrosities were the ones on the island now. Zeroi had fulfilled his end of the deal with Leroy. Although Leroy was completely gone, his influence carried through Zeroi's actions. Perhaps Leroy was the one that was victorious after all. 2 years pass. Zeroi completely perfects the ways of Leroy's interdimensional travel. He creates a massive portal in the center of the island, leading to an alternate universe, the Treq universe. Since he was now the god of that universe, it would only make sense for him to go there and rule over the dimension. Zeroi flew through the portal and left the island for the monstrosities.